MJD Beats.
Live on the National Sports Studios from Spreaker.com, you are listening to In the Paint with Jordan Hunter and your host, Cameron Sadeghi.
Hello and welcome to In the Paint. I am alongside Jordan Hunter and this is Cameron Sadeghi here for NBA news and analysis here on In the Paint. And breaking news out of Detroit. Josh Smith is no longer a Piston. He is waived by the team. The announcement was Monday. Stan Van Gundy talked about Smith leaving and how they want new changes in Detroit. Is this a good move for the Detroit Pistons?
It's a surprising move. I don't know about good, but it's very surprising. You see in sports all these, like we saw Deshaun Jackson get waived by the Eagles over summer, and this is the same thing. We know Josh Smith wasn't performing at his as high as we know he could. He was only averaging 13 points a game and 7.2 rebounds, and he's still shooting over 1-3 a game, even though he's shooting less than 30% from there. And the team was 10.3 points better per possession with him on the bench. So I think Van Gundy went into the season thinking, okay, maybe I can work with this, but then he realized 25 games in, this isn't going to work, and it was Josh Smith who was the odd man out, and I think this will help Detroit. I don't know if they'll get better, but it won't make them worse.
Yeah, I agree. It will help them, and I think there are too many mouths to feed in Detroit. I mean, so many guys need the basketball that, like you always say, there's only one ball, and I think it's good to let Smith go. And honestly, I think he just jacks up too many perimeter jump shots that really, it's just an awkward thing when he plays that three position. It just doesn't fit him right. He can't be that three, and it's just hard for Detroit to have success when he is the three. And I'm happy that he could find a better place, and Detroit is parting ways with him. And I know you said they can get a little bit better, and maybe since the East, down low at the 7th and 8th spot, Detroit could maybe make the playoffs. If
they have a strong push, it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, wait, go ahead.
I'll say one thing I liked about, well, not liked, but it's probably a plus for them is this can help Andre Drummond's growth as a player, because Josh Smith and Greg Monroe, they were kind of clogging up the middle, and Drummond is a force in the key, and so he can get more touches in the key, and Brandon Jennings can get some shots off, and Monroe can work around that elbow area, and now the Josh Smith sweepstakes begins.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So where do you think Smith would be the best place to go?
I think Houston would be good for him. You look at that front court with him there, Ariza, Smith, Howard. That's the best defensive front court in the league automatically, because they're all defensive-minded players, and Smith brings offense, and I think that could take some pressure off of James Harden and Howard at the same time. I think it just gives them a huge third monster to that team.
Yeah, that's a good place for Josh Smith to go, because Houston kind of needs that extra kick offensively, and he could provide that inside force. And also, Smith's ability to block shots is also would be great for Houston, and that could help Harden and some of the perimeter guards that struggle to play defense. Beverly plays defense, but I don't want to talk about Papa Nicolau and the rest of the horrid perimeter defense of the Rockets. But if Houston can get Josh Smith, you're gonna have two shot blockers, and it would be great if Houston could acquire Josh Smith. So let's move on from the Josh Smith story and talk about Rondo. He is now a Maverick, and now everyone is saying Dallas is a finals contender. Is Dallas really a finals contender?
I really think they do. Rondo is a guy who can control the ball, control the tempo of the game. And by tempo, I mean how many meaningful possessions the Mavericks get. And with him, I think he really changes the way they're going to look at their style of play. Rondo, he can dribble the ball a little too much, but he's always going to find the open guy. And that's a good thing to have when you have a Dallas team with so many weapons. Ellis, Nowitzki, Parsons, and Chandler around the basket. Just lob it up to him. That's an easy 2 points. It was a splash move by Dallas. Kind of surprising. I thought he was going to be leaning more towards Houston, but I guess Dallas had the better package for him.
Yeah, you make a good point there. It was a splash move. That's typical Mark Cuban there when he goes after a guy like Rondo. And I worry about their bench. Is their bench good enough to win a championship? But in a way, this team kind of reminds me of a 2011 Mavericks a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because you have Barea, you have Chandler, Dirk, can get hot. You have Ellis. It seems like they have enough parts to get there. It's going to be interesting if they can, because this is the toughest Western Conference I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, by far.
In my life. I mean, I can't... Even the Pelicans could shock somebody if they get in the playoffs. They could shock somebody in the first round. I mean, they're that good. Every team has a chance. And you look at Dallas, it's just the one problem is their bench. What happens if there's an injury in the starting lineup? Who's going to step in and make big plays? I don't know if they have enough guys to do that. I know they have the coach. I know they have the owner. And I know they have the star. But do they have enough role players to get the job done? We just don't know.
Yeah, their backcourt is nice with Rondo, Harris, and Barea, but their front court, Brandon Wright was a great player around the basket. His hands around the basket were great. He had one of the highest field goal percentages in the league, highest true shooting percentages in the league. So he was a monster when it comes to anywhere around the paint. And now you don't have that presence inside when Chandler gets in foul trouble or when Dirk has to go to the bench. You don't have that inside presence. And I think that may hurt them. Because we're going to see some younger teams whose big men are going to play longer. You're going to see OKC, like you said, the Pelicans. They got some young big men. Portland, if you count LaMarcus Aldridge. And we see a team like Golden State who plays small, whose guys are young, who run the floor. So it's going to be interesting to see if when Dallas makes the playoffs, hopefully they do, how they manage those minutes. And how if they can get some of their role players to step up and have bigger roles than just bench roles.
Yeah, I think that, and we made our predictions early in the year. I said San Antonio's winning the whole thing, but like, why does everybody laugh anytime I make a prediction for San Antonio?
They're struggling right now.
I know, but they'll pick it up. I still believe in them, but I think. You look at the West, and I'm kind of worried a little bit about my San Antonio prediction because I think the playoffs in the West is simply just matchups.
And execution, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, what happens if Houston, gets some lucky matchups and they're all of a sudden in the finals? I mean, you never know. So it's going to be interesting to see down the line, April, May, and who's going to be there in June. That will certainly be interesting.
All right, I have a question for you about San Antonio.
Yeah.
2 back-to-back triple overtime losses. First to Memphis, second to Portland. And then 2 weeks ago, we saw Kobe and the Lakers pull one off in overtime. Are you worried about the way they've been finishing games and the way they're not executing down the stretch and in overtime?
I think they've become a little bit too dependent on Ginobili you'll see, even in those late game situations, they've just given the ball and say, just create and get a play for us. And I don't think that's typical San Antonio. That's not how they won the championship last year. I think they need more guys to step up, and they need to have, everyone a more equal opportunity system. And I know they have that. They're just not executing those principles, and they kind of look lost right now. But I'm not worried about them. I think they'll have an easy stretch where they'll play bad teams and they'll be able to rack in some wins to make the playoffs and stay healthy.
Yeah, and this is a San Antonio team that's been riddled with injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of the more injured teams that San Antonio has had in the last few years. Thiago Splitter missed a lot of time in the beginning. Patty Mills has yet to play. Ginobili missed some games. Kawhi Leonard has been missing games for the past 3 or 4 games. We've got Parker's been dealing with an injury, so they've been injured. They haven't been able to have all their stars to be able to pull out those type of wins that we usually see Spurs basketball play. If Spurs go to overtime, we're used to seeing them beat down a team in overtime, get out to an early lead. We're not used to them taking a double or triple overtime, and their legs aren't ready for that.
But I think also, too, this period may be good for a guy like Kyle Anderson, who is still developing, and now he's going to get an opportunity to develop at a high level and get more chances. And this, I don't want to say injuries are a good thing. I'm trying to turn this into a positive for San Antonio, but this could really help out San Antonio. If they can develop Kyle Anderson into becoming a big-time role player, I mean, if everyone's healthy plus a Kyle Anderson fully developed, I mean, who can really beat San Antonio? Let's just be honest. I mean, this year, who can beat them if they're fully healthy with a developed Kyle Anderson?
Yeah, and getting those role players, those bench players, getting them, accustomed to playing close games is also a big thing. We saw that game against Dallas where they didn't have a lot of their guys, and they still took Dallas to the max. This was a Dallas team at full strength with Rondo there in his first game. And they took him to the very end. And I was very impressed by the guys like Corey Joseph, Kyle Anderson, Aaron Baines, those type of guys who stepped up. Danny Green has been playing great recently. So that really impressed me how Pop is still getting a lot from his guys when, they look like they're outmatched and outnumbered. They played with 8 guys that game.
That's just what I love about San Antonio. And I know anybody I talk to, whether it's at school or anything, they just find ways to rip on San Antonio. And you know what? I just can't believe that the Lakers beat the 2 teams that I've spoke highly of. They beat Toronto and they beat San Antonio this year. How? How do they beat those 2 teams, but they can't beat any other team, to be honest?
They can't beat the Kings.
Yeah, but they can somehow pull wins against Toronto and San Antonio. And they went into San Antonio and won. That doesn't make any sense.
The Lakers are a very puzzling team.
Do they just wake up against elite teams? I always feel that with bad teams. Like, even yesterday against the Jets, it seems like all of these horrible teams, whenever they play elite teams, they wake up. But once they play an above average or an average team, they just go through the motions.
It's weird. They can't play the teams that are at their level, but when they play the teams that are like way above them, they seem to turn it on. Sports are weird like that. I don't know what the players' motives are, what drives them, but maybe when they see that they're playing, they, like, say you see Philadelphia and they see Cleveland on their schedule, they circle that day and they say, okay, we're going to go hard, and they take it at them. They lose, but they still bring it.
Yeah. So we talked about I mentioned the Lakers right there and how they beat Toronto and San Antonio, but their star Kobe Bryant, should he take some time off? I think he should just shut it down overall. But should he take some time off?
I think he should. This is what he said. He said, I don't have much of a choice if the body's feeling the way it's feeling right now. You got to be smart. You got to make sure you get enough return on your investment with the amount of work that I do and put into my body and get to my body ready. For it to be sore as it is right now, sometimes you have to consider sitting down. I'm trying to shoulder a lot. I'm trying to figure out the puzzle of my body and getting it to respond so I can come through. Hopefully it's not Christmas Day, but what is the consequence of him sitting out a couple games here and there? I'm not talking four games in a row. I'm talking maybe something like like the Tim Duncan treatment.